All right, we're live. I would say this is a special episode of Monero Talk since we have a pretty big panel here of important doers and shakers in the Monero space. Today on the show we have Howard Chu, Needmoney90, and Tevador. If you guys don't mind, I'd rather you guys each do a quick little intro here so I don't kind of misdescribe you. So if you could kind of go around, maybe Tevador, we could start with you.
Okay, so basically, I guess the main developer of RandomX. The code is located in my repo on GitHub. And I guess we're a little team of like 3 people discussing. I'm doing most of the coding.
Okay. Howard, you want to give a quick intro?
All right, so I'm Howard Chu. I actually came up with the random proof of work idea that evolved eventually into RandomX. And I've done other stuff in the Manero project. I lead the open LDAP project and do a lot of open source development.
Thank you. Yeah, for anybody that wants to learn more about Howard, we also did an episode with him quite a while ago now, but I thought it was a great one. Needmoney90, you want to give us your background?
Yeah, I'm a moderator in the Manero community. I've been around for a while. Started the XMR Trader subreddit, among other things. Over the past month, I've been heavily involved in the proof of work discussion, talking to developers and exchange representatives and all sorts of people to just try and get an idea of where everybody's head's at. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, thanks to the 3 of you for coming on. Needmoney90, it's finally nice to put a face to the name. I've seen you read you on Reddit and elsewhere, and heard you on the Monero Coffee Chat podcast quite a bit, but never saw the face. Yeah, I guess today basically what I wanted to do was kind of go over what transpired on Sunday. I know that is the culmination, as you said, Needmoney, of I guess months of discussion. But if we could kind of get into that, and really my first question would be, just to kind of simplify things, is what really came out of that meeting, and is there kind of a plan moving forward that came out of that meeting? Have we kind of reached consensus, so to speak, among the developers as what steps we'll be taking in terms of moving ahead with thwarting Asics or whatever it may be, with keeping the mining network fair and distributed? Is there a plan that we will now be taking action on? So I don't know if Needmoney, you want to start off with that one?
Yeah, so I would say consensus is definitely settled in some areas, and in others it's fairly ambiguous as to what we're going to be doing. I would say the consensus is fairly solid on moving to RandomX in October pending audits, and that's the big thing. We need to be able to both fund and have a code freeze, fund audits, and make sure that there's no actual serious issues with it. And if we can't get that funding and we can't audit the thing before October, we're going to have to push it back a bit. But if everything does work out as expected, then we should be moving to RandomX in October.
Okay, so current path is to implement RandomX in October if it's audited by then, and everybody's happy with that audit. And then I guess also there was talk about the switch to SHA-3. So is the community, did they decide on that, whether or not that is something that we're going to prepare for, or is it just we implement RandomX and see what happens?
So there is some serious issues with the current system that we've been using, and there's a large number of people in the community who I would describe as idealists. And there's also a large block of people in the community that are GPU miners. And both of them are opposed to a switch away from a proof of work algorithm that favors commodity hardware. Specifically, the GPU miners want GPU mining hardware, but their interests haven't been particularly represented in the community at this point. The general consensus is that they're here for profit. They made an investment, and I'm sorry if we fork away from your hardware, but that the protocol's not here to protect your bottom line. As far as the ASIC argument goes, as far as I'm aware, there are 0 core developers and nobody close to the development of the protocol that is willing to continue on forking every 6 months. That is the unfortunate reality of the situation, and this is due to support concerns. If we do protocol tweaks, suddenly we have wallet developers, we have API developers, blockchain explorers, exchanges, everybody going and asking for support. We need the translations team to be able to finalize anything in the code. We need code freezes so we can actually do audits, bug checking. Testing needs to be done on clients. We need to do the build process. Everything is pointing towards 6 months being completely unsustainable for the developers, and they cannot keep up at this pace. So unfortunately, any solution that the community is going to come to, just based on reality, is going to have to be able to fit into a 1-year fork schedule. And if it doesn't, then we cannot realistically follow that path. So right now, the consensus on the most prudent thing to do if we have a 1-year fork schedule, if Asics get taped out in 3 or 4 months, then we're going to have secret Asics on the network for, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 of the amount of time that a proof of work is around. And that means that whether we like it or not, we're embracing Asics. If RandomX does not actually manage to retain ASIC resistance.
So
and-
just on the question of SHA-3, though, is there going to be a commitment going into it that if RandomX fails, we're switching to SHA-3? Or is there going to be that pre-commitment?
We cannot make a pre-commitment at this point. If it's not put at the protocol level, then it's going to be up for discussion with the current set of developers and community that happen once that event actually occurs. Right now, the most that we can do is project our current intentions.
Okay, Howard and Tevador, do you guys have any comment on that, on this concept of whether or not there should be this pre-commitment? Because I did hear some interesting arguments as to why you may want to do that. I think Fluffy Pony had mentioned, as a way to prevent a kind of a first mover advantage for ASIC manufacturers. So by pre-committing, it eliminates that first mover advantage. So do you guys have any comment on that? Howard, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few thoughts on that. First of all, it's like saying we have a crystal ball and we can predict the future. 6 months or a year from now, SHA-3 might not be a good choice. There might be a stronger algorithm. There might be a research paper published saying, oh, we figured out how to make SHA-3 100 times easier to crack. Any of these things could happen, right? So pre-committing to a change is one thing. Pre-committing to a specific algorithm such as SHA-3, I think, is unwise, right?
Gotcha.
So we have said, we obviously do need a fallback plan. If RandomX gets deployed and then the network gets owned within 3 months, we obviously need to have a plan in place for that possibility, right? Pre-committing, saying yes, we are going to have an ASIC-friendly algorithm as a fallback. I mean, that makes sense. If we all fall flat on our face, then we do need a fallback.
That is the general consensus. Is if we're going to have ASICs, whether we like it or not, based off of our fork schedule, then we might as well do something that promotes non-secret ASICs, or ASICs that have serious improvements that can be made in secret.
So what would that plan look like then? So
SHA-3 would be one option. It's currently the best option that we see, but that doesn't preclude some better proof of work algorithm coming up that's easier to make into a chip.
Right, but as Howard's saying, but we don't pre-commit to it. We just see what happens with RandomX, and then we make the decision there at that point whether or not it's SHA-3 or something else.
Basically, yeah. So there was an argument that if we pre-commit to SHA-3 today, then manufacturers can prepare and they'll have them in stock for whenever the eventuality arises. But realistically, no manufacturer is going to do that. No manufacturer is going to start building these chips 2 years in advance, right? First of all, process technology is going to get better over the course of 2 years. So any chip they start building today is going to be obsolete by the time it comes to sell them. And a manufacturer that waits until the last possible moment to build their chips is going to have a faster chip anyway. So this whole pre-committing to a change 2 years in advance, I think that's just nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tevador, do you have any comments on that?
I would just add that also another topic was part of the discussion that was the definition.
Can you talk closer to the mic?
And that was, how do we define that RandomX failed? It was one of the major parts of the discussion. Currently, we don't have actually a reliable estimate about how resistant it might be. We are estimating that possible a RandomX ASIC might be 2 or 3 times more efficient than CPU. This might change in the future. We know that AMD is releasing new chips this summer. We haven't tested those chips. It's the new generation of AMD Ryzen chips. We're expecting that those chips might be even more efficient than the most efficient CPUs we have tested so far. So this might also change the expected ratio a little bit. But the general consensus was that RandomX would be considered as a failure if the ratio is closer to 10x between CPU and ASIC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you guys have an opinion? Well, I guess 2 questions then. So an opinion on whether or not, is it a failure if it's 2x, 3x, 10x, and how do we even know ASICs have actually entered the network? I think there was some discussion there as well. I guess the idea being, if we see hash rate go up but price stay steady, is that really the indicator, or are there other indicators? How do we know when RandomX actually fails, if it does fail in the future?
That is currently non-consensus. I'm happy to go and discuss that on this show, though I think this is more about hashing out what the current community's views on the subject are. Right now, we don't really have a reliable indicator of what would constitute a failure of RandomX. Howard has stated, I believe it was Howard, that we could, for example, if these ASICs were used in heating, you could get, and it was 2 times more efficient for the best ASIC possible, then your heating bill would be reduced by 50%. So even a 2x ASIC could potentially be useful if it actually gets integrated into infrastructure, which was an interesting proposal.
I think that was Arctic Mine.
That was Arctic Mine? Okay. Yeah.
Howard, do you have an opinion there on how we know if RandomX fails, how we know it has failed?
Yeah, again, our best estimate was, if we start seeing GPU miners leaving the network in droves, that's going to be a fairly strong indicator. And the indicator this past time around with Kryptonite version 2 was that the hash rate spiked up even though the price wasn't moving. Because ordinarily when the network is behaving properly, the hash rate follows the price. Right. So the fact that the hash rate was increasing even though the price was stagnant, that told us something was wrong. So those are the strongest indicators, right? We had random anonymous leakers, contacting people privately saying that they knew that certain ASICs existed. Okay, and now we obviously can't count on that information being given to us every time. But there are different channels that information comes across. The other thing I wanted to mention on this particular point of we won't really know the true efficiency of an ASIC unless we have one in our hands when we're measuring its power usage at the wall, right? And it would be possible, for example, okay, right now, today, the most power efficient kryptonite miner is an AMD Ryzen family processor. Okay, I mean, the GPUs are pretty good, but on a hash per watt basis, I think the CPU actually is the winner right now. And somebody could come along and say, well, I figured out how to put 256 of these Ryzen chips on a single motherboard. Okay, and that would blow the hash rate out of the water. It wouldn't actually be more efficient, power efficient, than anything that anybody else could get their hands on. It would just be such a huge concentration of hash power in one place, right? And we also can't tell the difference between that and a more efficient ASIC. We can't tell the difference between just throwing an awful lot of power at it versus a very efficient power at it.
So does that essentially mean we never kind of get over the issue of the deepest pockets have an advantage?
Yeah, that's totally true. That advantage will always be there. And economies of scale are what they are. Yeah, so whoever can afford to slap 1,000 CPUs onto a board is going to have the advantage over everybody else.
Back to one of the other questions that came. So if we do achieve kind of RandomX is implemented, and then we're only seeing kind of a 2x advantage for an ASIC versus a 10x advantage, is that itself still a problem too? Are we then still going to get taken over by ASICs, even though it's only maybe a 2x or 3x advantage?
That's debatable. A lot of people are saying, yes, that is going to kill other miners. If you look at the Ethereum network right now, that is their current situation, that ASICs are on their network. They are 2 times more efficient than GPU miners. But that has been the status quo for over a year, right? So it hasn't driven any GPU miners out yet. GPUs are still the majority miner on their network. But it is making the GPU miners unhappy, and that's why they're looking at ProgPow. Okay, so like I said, it's an open question as to how long that would be viable. Yeah.
I want to get into RandomX itself, but before I do, I just kind of want to zoom out too, and kind of talk about why we're even doing this in the first place. Obviously, that the goal is to maintain a distributed mining network, but it's kind of worked thus far with our proof of work changes every 6 months. Needmoney90, I know you kind of already touched upon this a little bit, but why can't we just continue down that path? Why can't we just continue to change the proof of work algorithm every 6 months? Why is that definitely a no-no? And are there, I think there's been some advantages with having updates every 6 months, maybe not necessarily proof of work updates, but this trend where we upgrade the network every 6 months has seemed to come with some advantages over other coins, such as Bitcoin, where we can achieve privacy and fungibility and maintain that as we evolve. So if we're going to be continuing to evolve and having these network upgrades, why not just continue to do the proof of work upgrades? And so I guess 2 questions. Why can't we do proof of work upgrades anymore? And in general, do you guys think upgrading the network for other things, like to continue to evolve in terms of maintaining privacy, do you think that's a good thing? Or is that also eventually off the table, that we shouldn't be upgrading at all?
So Yeah, I'm not saying 6 months forks are off the table entirely, just that there's 0 developers that I'm aware of who are willing to work on them right now, due to just the amount of stress and amount of time and amount of coordination that it requires. And if you think you can find a development team who's able to do what the current Monero core team is doing, in terms of updates, translation, liaison with exchanges, etc., and you think that they can do that in a safe way without introducing bugs into the protocol on a 6-month fork schedule, be my guest. Like find the devs and do it, because nobody right now is willing to.
Howard, do you guys have a...
I think that's overstating a little bit. You know, people are feeling a bit burned by this last fork because we moved it forward a month, and that threw everybody's schedules off, and then it became a last-minute scramble instead of, you know, having 1 month to get all the last-minute details in place. The previous 6-month fork, I suppose it also had some last-minute issues as well. So our track record so far has been we have not adhered to a 6-month schedule with a sane freeze date and all of these other things. Okay, that hasn't happened so far. So yeah, there's a lot to be desired on that track record. But this fork was, you know, unusual because we moved things forward by a month. Right? And if we had not moved things forward by a month, everything else would have been in place at the expected 6-month date.
So you're okay with network upgrades? It's not something that we need to, you know, I mean, Bitcoin is always talking about how things are ossifying, and that's a good thing. Are we entering the ossification stage, or are we going to continue to upgrade our network?
It looks to me like we're going to continue upgrading. You know, the Manero Research Lab is still investigating new ways to, you know, save space on transactions, new ways to make transaction verification faster. All of these things
On a 6-month schedule?
You know, the research lab doesn't have hard dates, so we don't know when their output will actually be available for use, right? But, you know, clearly, if there's a feature that we can deploy safely that will, you know, reduce the blockchain size, will reduce sync times, you know, we want to use it, right?
I would add to this that an upgrade which involves change of the proof of work algorithm is generally more disruptive than a network upgrade which does not change the proof of work.
Yeah, agreed.
Uh,
We're talking about 6-month proof of work updates.
Yeah, why is it more disruptive, guys?
because if the proof of work changes, more software needs to be updated. For example, miners, pools. So it's not just the nodes, not just the wallet software which needs to be updated. And also the mining algorithm is what secures the network. So any disruption can make the network more vulnerable than if it's just new feature in the protocol.
Mm-hmm. Are there also arguments as to why we would want to do it, because, or continue to do this, because it kind of becomes its own form of centralization? So we have a few people, devs, deciding what the new proof of work will be every 6 months. Is that also some reasoning behind why we may not want to continue to do it?
Yeah, I would say rolling a proof of work change in along with network upgrades kind of creates a compulsory situation where you have to accept the network upgrades along with the proof of work change, which I think is a point that hasn't really been explored much at this point, and should probably be discussed more in some GitHub issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the other changes are already essentially mandatory, right? If you don't accept them, you get left behind on the previous chain. You know, you become XMO or Monero Classic or whatever, which goes off in dies in an obscure little corner. So, it's already the case that, the community has to accept the non-proof of work changes. There really is no choice.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah. So from what I'm hearing from you guys, and my understanding is, so kind of, we will continue. Monero will continue to do upgrades. It's just we want to move away from doing the proof of work upgrades or changes. So let's get into RandomX. We have Tevador on, who is, I guess, most certainly the expert. Tevador, the floor is all yours. You want to just kind of talk about RandomX a little bit, and Howard, I know obviously you were integral in kind of the genesis of it, but Tevador, do you want to just speak about RandomX for a little bit?
So RandomX is a successor of RandomJS. It was the original idea. Started, I believe, last year in the spring. We started working on a code generator for JavaScript, which would then be used as a proof of work algorithm. We worked on this, if I remember correctly, for more than 6 months, but we found issues which we were unable to solve. The two major issues were, firstly, an Asic could completely skip the part of generating and parsing JavaScript because the generator, the code which generates the JavaScript code, actually understands the code before it generates the JavaScript. So an ASIC could run just the generator and execute directly the statement tree instead of going through JavaScript. That was the biggest issue. Second issue was that existing JavaScript interpreters are bulky. We had issues with portability. I was investigating one JavaScript engine, but it didn't work out very well. We had issues on some ARM platforms. There were many bugs in it. Even it was the smallest possible engine, it was still about 100,000 lines of code, which, if you compare this to RandomX, is probably less than 5,000 lines. So from the point of auditability, it's much easier to check 5,000 lines for bugs than 100,000 lines. So we kind of departed from this idea, and after some more discussion, I started working on a specification of a virtual machine. So we moved from JavaScript to lower level. Then JavaScript is a very high level language, so we moved closer to the hardware, basically as close to the hardware as possible. So RandomX, the language in which RandomX programs are generated, is basically on the level of machine code. So the instructions, most of the instructions translate one-to-one to native machine instructions. So in this case, it's a lot more difficult for an ASIC to, or there is no practical gain from skipping the code. Actually, there is no code parser anymore. Now RandomX code just takes random data and interprets it as code. That's how the RandomX code generator actually doesn't have any logic, which is the biggest difference from RandomJS, where we had a lot of logic to generate the code, because if you are generating JavaScript, the code must meet the syntax rules of JavaScript, or it will not run, it will not compile. but we designed RandomX code in such a way that there are no syntax rules actually. So any sequence of random bytes gives you a valid program. So this is how we fixed basically the problem of skipping the code parser. And also this gives us much lower overhead because the compiler of RandomX into machine code is very simple because the RandomX instructions are so low level. So this is the essence of basically how we came up with this idea.
Very cool. Yeah, for us non-developers, people who haven't like, how did you even become a part of this? I know. So Howard, I believe you started with the RandomJS. Then how did it move on to this next stage where Tevador and others got involved? I'm just curious how those things kind of happen on the in the development world.
I think the first proof of concept was from Howard. It was the rand prog, which I believe was originally a generator of C code, which was slightly adapted for JavaScript. So this idea, I found it very interesting. So I started my own version of it, more complete generator for JavaScript. Like I started writing a JavaScript generator from the scratch. My motivation was to use more of the features of JavaScript to generate more complex code than just C code. So actually, the RandomJS proof of concept is still available on GitHub. It's not developed anymore, but I think we got to the point where we actually got hashes from the algorithm. So also there are some performance numbers, but it never continued from that due to the issues I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Tevin, what's your did you approach this as somebody you were already in the Monero community? Have you been in the Monero community for a long time, or is it just that you're somebody who's interested in proof of work and that's what attracted you to this? How did you start working on this?
Firstly, I like the challenge of uh, designing new. This is basically like bleeding edge technology. Has not been done before. I've been part of the Monero community for a longer time as a miner. I became more interested in the proof of work at the beginning of last year when the first batch of Asics was discovered to be mining on the network. So in that time, I became studying actually Kryptonite. That's when the first Reddit discussions began about new ideas about proof of work. So this is what interested me the most, and that's basically how RandomJS development started.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess, time will prove whether or not RandomX actually is ASIC resistant, and if it can only be mined essentially most efficiently by CPU. But what is your gut? I mean, obviously, you think you're hoping that this will work. What are your deepest thoughts on this? Where do you see it going once we implement RandomX?
Oh, well, it's hard to guess. Basically, the way I'm developing RandomX, or we are developing RandomX, not with the primary idea of being ASIC resistant, but to have an algorithm for which the CPU is the best possible hardware, or which runs on the CPU in such a way that leaves very little room for optimization. This is basically the best you can do. I've looked at many attempts at ASIC resistance. Every time the main premise is that ASIC cannot do something efficiently, and they build the proof of work around it. And many times this has proven to be not true, because usually it's the person developing the algorithm is a software developer, doesn't have any experience with chip design, etc. So we are looking at RandomX from the opposite direction. We are developing it to be the perfect algorithm for the CPU, and we are hoping this is enough. This is basically the best thing you can hope for. If this is not enough, probably, then we have to conclude that it's impossible to win this ASIC resistance competition.
It's an exciting experiment. Howard, how are you feeling about it these days? So obviously you initiated all this with RandomJS. It's evolved into RandomX. What's your current take?
Well, as I've said in a couple other forums, the basic approach is sound. We know for sure that we can prevent Asics with a 1000x efficiency advantage. We know for sure we can prevent a 100x advantage. Okay, that's just based on the structure of an ASIC, what it can optimize versus what a CPU can perform, right? The fact that we force whatever machine executes this algorithm is required to have an instruction fetcher and an instruction decoder means that it's already doing 40 or 50% of what a CPU must do. Okay, so right off the top, those multiple order of magnitude advantages disappear. So, we are really only talking about, can they get to be 3x, or can they get to be 4x, or can they get to be only 2x? And these are, at this point, we're talking very fine degrees of efficiency, compared to the 1000x that we were seeing with, Kryptonite version 0 and all of that, right? So, the question, will RandomX work? It's like, of course it'll work within a certain range of parameters. Of course it will eliminate, ASICs that are 100x more efficient. Of course it will do that. Will it eliminate ASICs that are twice as efficient? That part we don't know.
So we had Christy Lee on the show the other day. She's, I guess, running the Prague POW project. I know that after that interview, there was some commenting and debate on Reddit whether or not some of the things she said were inaccurate or misleading. I think this would be maybe a good time to switch into that conversation. I think she was even brought up on Sunday as possibly being somebody that we may want to have audit RandomX. So maybe you guys can comment on whether or not she would be a good fit for that. And then I do think she had some interesting comments or way of looking at things. She basically, I guess, in this situation, she would be describing the CPU as the new ASIC in this situation. So basically saying, ASIC as a theoretically, there's always ASICs. So even with RandomX, and if it worked perfectly, the CPU would then essentially become the new ASIC because it's just can mine more efficiently than anything else. So yeah, I guess what are you guys' thoughts on that interview that we had, and anything you guys want to maybe bring up and retort? Now's the time.
Calling something like a toaster or an integrated circuit an ASIC for its own particular use is so reductive that it makes it an almost useless word. Really what we're looking for is a commoditized ASIC, something that's sold in every city that you could go to on the planet and has very little risk of import restriction, etc. And just calling everything an ASIC kind of really misses that point.
Do you think she's a potential candidate for auditing RandomX?
I won't speak on that.
Howard, you have an opinion on that? Actually, I know you do, but you want to state it?
I've got a few fairly strong opinions. After that interview that you conducted, I thought it was wall to wall full of disinformation, and frankly, I don't find her trustworthy. The kinds of things that she was saying, she was saying things that she already knew were false the moment she said them. Okay, like the whole notion of tying a proof of work algorithm to unique chip IDs, which she threw out early on in the talk, is like, the unique chip IDs are so easily spoofed. Even Intel SGX which was supposed to be utterly secure, has already been broken. All right, and she knew that already. She knew that chip IDs are easily spoofed. Right. So I would say there was such insincerity in the information she threw out there that no, I would not trust her to do an audit.
Yeah, we'll put a link in that video to this section of this video. Need Money recommended that as well, just to kind of clarify, what was said during that interview, so we could talk about any of the inaccuracies there. So, I mean, do you think there's a motive there, or it's just
I would have to say, a lot of those things were so obviously wrong, they couldn't have been accidental mistakes. All right. I would say there has to be an agenda there. And, she is part of a company that did produce hardware miners in the past, and I mean, yeah, I would say she's got an interest. She's got, she obviously has an agenda to promote ProgPow in the Ethereum space, right? So there is a lot going on there that I don't think was admitted upfront. The whole notion, like Need Money already touched on, that everything is an ASIC. All right. Again, I think that was intentional disinformation. Yeah, it dilutes the word down to the point of meaninglessness, right? I mean, it's true that every hardware company says all of their products are ASICs because they view every product as a specific application, right? But that's again so meaningless, especially in this discussion. In this context, we know what we are talking about when we say the word ASIC is a fixed function mining chip, right? That is what everybody is talking about when they use that word. So to say, oh, everything's an ASIC, that's just sowing confusion. That's FUD essentially, and most of what she was talking was just intentional FUD.
Was there anything else in particular she brought up that you guys want to talk about?
I shut off the video after she mentioned tying proof of work to chip IDs. I was not able to continue watching past that point. So if there's anything else that needs to be dispelled past there, I have no clue.
There were tons of points there. She mentioned something about, there's only 2 CPU manufacturers in the world. And it's like, yeah, not really. IBM still makes power chips. Oracle still makes Spark. Obviously, there's dozens of manufacturers building ARM chips. So to say that, focusing on CPUs would actually have a centralizing effect on the network, again, that's nonsense. CPUs are already widely distributed across the world. Most people already own at least 5 or 6 of them scattered across their laptop, desktop, and phones, right? So they're already ubiquitous. And that's a ubiquity that, even if ASICs were in every electronics shop on the planet tomorrow, they still couldn't match the distribution that we get from CPUs right now.
It's a very good point. Tevador, do you have any remarks on this topic?
Yes, well, I think Howard mentioned most of the important points. Calling CPU an ASIC may be technically correct, but it's misleading in this situation because ASIC resistant, we are not building RandomX to be resistant to any integrated circuit or a particular integrated circuit. We're building it to match hardware which is already present in everyone's home, in many data centers across the world, and widely distributed, unlike specialized chips which are produced by unregulated companies and cannot even be bought publicly.
How about the I think Needmoney you touched on a little bit, but this idea she brought up about kind of the Internet of Things would essentially be mining Monero in the future. Your smart TV, your smart refrigerator. Is that something that's
No, that's not realistic in my opinion. The only thing that makes sense is something that's expected to be burning energy anyways, so that would be heating. Expecting a device to be able to mine at a profit when you have large-scale mining facilities with low-cost electricity available elsewhere, I think is a fairly silly argument. They're not going to be breaking even, and from that perspective, they probably shouldn't be mining if they're an IoT device.
So as we wrap it up here, I mean, what do you guys? So I think this was great. I think we covered, what happened on Sunday really well, where we're headed. What is the? I mean, the ultimate goal, I guess, is we have a network that's mined by non-centralized computers all around the world,
If possible.
if possible. So, any other remarks on the big general concept there of where we're trying to get?
I think I've expressed everything I wanted to.
There was a mention of like large data centers or big server farms being able to blow away the network, and I guess that's kind of similar to the whole botnet argument. And in both cases, it doesn't turn out to be that realistic. For example, if you say, Oak Ridge National Lab is going to have this supercomputer with 50,000 x86 cores in it and 100,000 GPUs in it, and all they'd have to do is decide to start mining Monero, and they could overrun the network. Again, it's not really realistic in the first place. If you look at the numbers, one supercomputer really isn't enough to counterbalance every other miner that's currently on the network today. The other thing is, these supercomputers are busy 24/7. They have researchers who have signed up on a wait list to use them, and they've been waiting for 12 months or 18 months just to get project time on these machines. So it's not like they're going to have this idle time where suddenly they can switch to mining Monero. It's just not going to happen.
Another question too, actually, this concept of potentially using multiple proof of work algorithms at once. Do you guys have any comment there on the feasibility of that, or the reasons why that would or wouldn't make sense?
That's currently under discussion, but I would say that the consensus is far from settled.
Yeah, nobody has demonstrated that they can do it safely yet. They have demonstrated that they can do it poorly and get hacked. So,
And what would be the goal with that? What is the would be the purpose of doing that?
I think the suggested goal is to allow GPUs to still be ultra competitive.
So we're not just CPU mining. We're CPU and GPU mining.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. I just want to see if there's any big questions we missed in the chat here. Tevador, do you have any comment on this dual proof of work concept?
Well, the main reason why it might seem counterintuitive, but dual proof of work is actually less safe than single algorithm, because it gives the attacker can choose which of the algorithms to attack, and if the cost of obtaining hash rate is not exactly the same between the two algorithms, then this gives an advantage to any attacker right out of the bat.
That's interesting. Do you guys have any comment on that?
Oh, he's exactly right. When you have multiple algorithms running in parallel, you're actually multiplying your attack surface. You're not making the system stronger. You're making it much weaker.
And to that point, the intention of choosing a dual proof of work algorithm would explicitly be to protect the profits of the GPU miners. I can see very little reason to adopt a dual proof of work algorithm other than that. With RandomX in the pipeline.
All right. I guess we'll see what comes of that. This was a great talk. Thank you guys for all coming on and agreeing to do it at this time. I know you're kind of all in different places of the world. I'm tuning in on Sunday and watching what transpired in the IRC chat. It was great just to watch it for 2 hours and just see the great minds of Manero kind of come to consensus on how we should be moving forward. And overall, I think everything was kind of positive. There wasn't, I didn't see any like real trolling there or anything. So hopefully things continue to stay like that in those terms. Yeah. Any closing remarks from you guys? I think this is great. I'm excited to see RandomX implemented and hopefully in October. Thank you guys for all your hard work. And if you have any further comments, now's the time.
It's been great being on the show, Doug. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's pretty interesting watching your discussion of the cross-section of the Manero community.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish I could do a better job. I'm not as technical as all you guys, but I'm trying to kind of be that bridge to Joe Schmo Manero, which is kind of like myself. But yeah, any other comments, guys?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show again. Always good to be able to throw thoughts out there.
Tevador?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. And if people want to follow the development of RandomX, they can find the discussion on GitHub.
All right. Yes. Thank you for all your hard work and thank you for coming on. I should mention. Go ahead.
Just GitHub or the Manero POW channel. Manero-POW on Freenode IRC is where a lot of the discussion happens.
Okay. I just need to mention the magical crypto conference that I'll be attending, and there will be Manero folk there. Obviously, Fluffy Pony. I'll be there. I'll be trying to do as many Manero related interviews as possible. So looking forward to that. That's coming up in May It will be in New York City, which is where I'm located anyway. And then there's the big Monero conference in Denver. Are any of you guys attending that?
Yes, I will be attending the conference.
Oh, great. Look forward to meeting you there.
Yeah, and I should be there as well.
Fantastic. Tevador, are you going to any of these?
Unfortunately, I will not be attending.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you guys, and look forward to meeting you guys in person.
Thanks,
Oh,
Doug.
hang on a second. We
what's up?
we have to give a shout out to Medusa for monitoring
yes.
the chat tonight.
Thank you, Medusa.
All right. Thank you, Medusa. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Good night.